Taiwanese people are people from Taiwan who share a common Taiwanese culture and speak Chinese or Aboriginal languages as a mother tongue, made out of two ethnic groups, Han Chinese, who make up 98% of the population, and Aboriginals, who make up the remaining 2%. Taiwanese people may also refer to individuals who either claim or are imputed cultural identity focused on Taiwan or areas under the control of the government of the Republic of China since 1945, including Penghu, Kinmen, and Matsu Islands. At least three competing paradigms are used to identify someone as a Taiwanese person: nationalist criteria, self-identification criteria, and socio-cultural criteria. These standards are fluid, and result from evolving social and political issues. The complexity resulting from competing and evolving standards is compounded by a larger dispute regarding Taiwan's identity, the political status of Taiwan, and its potential de jure Taiwan independence or political integration with China. According to government figures, over 95% of Taiwan's population of 23.4 million consists of Han Chinese, while 2.3% are Austronesian Taiwanese Aborigines. The category of Han Chinese consists of the three main groups, Hoklo, Hakka, and mainland Chinese. However, acculturation, intermarriage and assimilation have resulted in some degree of mixing of the Han and Taiwanese Aborigine bloodlines. Although the concept of the four great ethnic groups was alleged to be the deliberate attempt by the Hoklo-dominated Democratic Progressive Party to diffuse ethnic tensions, this conception has become a dominant frame of reference for dealing with Taiwanese ethnic and national issues. Despite the wide use of the four great ethnic groups in public discourse as essentialized identities, the relationships between the peoples of Taiwan have been in a constant state of convergence and negotiation for centuries. The continuing process of cross-ethnic mixing with ethnicities from within and outside Taiwan, combined with the disappearance of ethnic barriers due to a shared socio-political experience, has led to the emergence of Taiwanese as a larger ethnic group, except on the island of Kinmen, whose populace consider themselves as Kinmenese or Chinese, and as well as inhabitant of Matsu Islands, whereby they also consider themselves as Chinese. Definitions of Taiwanese identities are not fixed, but fluid and change with time and memory or in response to a changing environment rather than stemming from a primordial or authentic source. Babha 1994-1. Brown 2004-5. New identities are continually emerging based on individuals' Euro unregistered trademark perceptions of commonalities and differences as the patterns of local communities, kinship and language pattern usage change with economic, cultural and demographic change, and on the national experience. The word Taiwanese people has multiple meanings and can refer to one of the following: all citizens of the Republic of China. Those who hold the citizenship of the Republic of China, not necessarily those based in Taiwan or Penghu, but also include those living in Kinmen, Matsu Islands and other ruling territory of the Republic of China. This meaning is not accepted by the people of Kinmen and Matsu Islands. Ancestors who before the Japanese rule of Taiwan had moved to the island of Taiwan, its minor islands, Penghu Islands etc. This includes the ancient Yu people, Han Chinese, Taiwanese Aborigines as well as Dutch people. In addition, this includes Japanese migrants from Japan to Taiwan during the Japanese rule of Taiwan and their descendants today. People living outside Taiwan before or after 1949, but are of Taiwanese ancestry or descent, who may live in other territories including mainland China and do not necessarily hold the nationality of the Republic of China. They may not necessarily be born or live in Taiwan. Outside Taiwan, they are typically known as overseas Taiwanese, or people of Taiwanese descent. Besides the factors as above for consideration, whether one identify oneself as a Taiwanese, depends also on how a person and another person's self-identification. The history of Taiwanese identity. The earliest notion of a Taiwanese group identity emerged in the form of a national identity following the Qing dynasty's ceding of Taiwan to Japan in the Treaty of Shimonoseki in 1895. Prior to Japanese rule, residents of Taiwan developed relationships based on class solidarity and social connections rather than ethnic identity. Although Han often cheated Aborigines, They also married and supported one another against other residents of the same ethnic background. Taiwan was the site of frequent feuding based on ethnicity, lineage and place of origin. Japanese era equals. In the face of the Japanese colonial hierarchy, the people of Taiwan were faced with the unequal binary relationship between colonizer-colonized. This duality between one and other was evident in the 7 years of violence between the Japanese and groups of united anti-Japanese Han and Aborigines. Only later did the Japanese attempt to incorporate Taiwanese into the Japanese identity as loyal subjects, but the difference between the experience of the colonized and the colonizer polarized the two groups. The concept of race was utilized as a tool to confirm and facilitate Japanese political policies. A system of household registers based on the notion of race to separate and define groups of subjects. From within the group of non-Japanese, the government divided Han's citizens into Han and Hakka based on their perception of linguistic and cultural differences. The Japanese also maintained the Qing-era classification of Aborigines as either raw or cooked, which to the Japanese embodied the social ramification of ethnic origin and perceived loyalty to the empire. Japanese ultra-nationalist Governor Shintaro Ishihara insulted the Taiwanese, referring to them as Sanjokjin. I referred to the many Sanjokjin who entered Japan illegally. I thought some people would not know that word, so I paraphrased it and used Gaikokjin, or foreigners. But it was a newspaper holiday, so the news agencies consciously picked up the Sanjokjin part, causing the problem. After World War II, when Japan lost, the Chinese of Taiwanese origin and people from the Korean peninsula persecuted, robbed and sometimes beat up Japanese. It's at the time the word was used, so it was not derogatory. Rather, we were afraid of them. There's no need for an apology. I was surprised that there was a big reaction to my speech. In order not to cause any misunderstanding, I decided I will no longer use that word. It is regrettable that the word was interpreted in the way it was. Martial law era equals. In 1945, the Taiwanese faced a new unequal binary relationship when Taiwan entered the political sphere of the Republic of China. Shortly following the Kuomintang arrival, however, social conflict erupted in the midst of rampant government corruption, soaring inflation and an increasing flow of immigrants from China. The latter were preferred for jobs in the civil service as opposed to Taiwanese who were regarded as untrustworthy. Phillips 2003 8-9. Recurrent violent suppression of dissent also played an important role in enforcing a separate sense of Taiwanese-ness. Under the KMT structure, Taiwanese became a strong regional identity. The term has often been used synonymously with Benchgren, a term which covered both Hokkien and Hakka whose ancestors arrived in Taiwan before the Japanese restrictions on immigration in 1895. Taiwanese was used in contrast with Weshengren, who included the people who followed the KMT to Taiwan between 1945 and 1949 and their descendants. The government tended to stress provincial identities, with identification cards and passports issued until the late 1990s displaying one's ancestral province and county. During this period the terms cooked and raw Aborigines disappeared. The former raw Aborigines were termed Shandi Tongbao, Goshanzu or Goshan Tongbao. Democratic era equals, with Taiwan's political liberalization in the 1970s and 1980s, encouraged by Taiwan's changing international status, the concept of a Taiwanese people became politicized by opponents of the KMT. The Tangwai movement deployed concepts of Taiwanese identity against the authoritarian KMT government, often using extreme tactics to build a short-term ethnocentric opposition to the KMT. The campaign saw resonance with the people of Taiwan, and the term Taiwanese has been used by politicians of all parties to refer to the electorate in an effort to secure votes. The concept of a separate Taiwanese identity has become such an integral factor to the election culture in Taiwan, that identifying as a Taiwanese has become essential to being elected in Taiwan. New Taiwanese equals. The term New Taiwanese was coined by former President of the Republic of China, Li Tenghui in 1995 to bridge the ethnic cleavage that followed the February 28 incident of 1947 and characterized the frigid relations between Weshengren and Benchgren during 40 years of martial law. Although originally aimed at the successive generations of Taiwanese with mainlander ancestry, it has been further articulated by Lee and other political and social leaders to refer to any person who loves Taiwan and is committed to calling Taiwan home. Although critics have called the new Taiwanese concept a political ploy to win votes from Benchgren who regarded the KMT as an alien regime, it has remained an important factor in the dialectic between ethnic identities in Taiwan. Despite being adopted early on by former provincial governor James Soong and later by then Taipei mayoral candidate Ma Ying-jeou, the term has since been dropped from contemporary political rhetoric. Multicultural present equals, in contemporary Taiwan the phenomenon of mixed marriages between couples comprising different ethnic groups has grown to include people from the Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, Europe, the Americas and the Pacific Islands. The increasing number of marriages between Taiwanese and other countries creates a problem for the rigid definitions of ethnic identity used by both the ROC and the PRC when discussing Taiwan. In 1/4 of all marriages in Taiwan today, one partner will be from another country and 1 out of every 12 children is born to a family of mixed parentage. As Taiwan's birth rate is among the lowest in the world, this contingent is playing an increasingly important role in changing Taiwan's demographic makeup. By 2010, this social-cultural group of people is typically known as Taiwan's new resident Taiwanese human a degree Celsius F degree or 1/2 a degree I 1/4 per mil. The current situation of Taiwanese identity. In a 2002 poll by the Democratic Progressive Party, over 50% of the respondents considered themselves Taiwanese only, up from less than 20% in 1991. In 2006, Wu Nai-T of Academia Sinica said that many Taiwanese are still confused about identity, and are easily affected by political, social, and economic circumstances. In a poll released in December 2006 by the Straits Exchange Foundation, 57% of people on Taiwan consider themselves to be Taiwanese, 23% Chinese and 20% both Chinese and Taiwanese. In June 2008, according to a poll from a Taiwanese television network TVBS, when the respondents are not told that a Taiwanese can also be a Chinese, 68% of the respondents identify themselves as Taiwanese while 18% would call themselves Chinese. According to an annual household interview polls conducted by the National Shenki University, in 1991, only 13.6% of people identified themselves as Taiwanese, while by 2014, the number had risen to 60.2% and those who identified themselves as Chinese declined to only 3.4%. The poll also found in 2014, around 32.6% of interviewees think of themselves as both Taiwanese and Chinese. The sense of a collective Taiwanese identity has continued to increase despite fluctuations in support for pro-independence political parties. This has been cited as evidence that the concept of Taiwanese identity is not the product of local political manipulation, but an actual phenomenon of ethnic and socio-political identities. Major socio-cultural subgroups. According to governmental statistics, over 95% of Taiwan's 23.4 million people are Han Chinese, of which the majority includes descendants of early Hoklo immigrants who arrived from Fujian in large numbers starting in the 17th century. A significant minority of the Han group are the Hakka people, who comprise about 15% of the total population. The Hakkas emigrated chiefly from eastern Guangdong, speak Hakka Chinese, and originally took up residence in hilly areas. The so-called mainland Chinese Han subgroup includes and descends from the 2 million nationalists who fled to Taiwan following the communist victory in mainland China in 1949. The non-Han Austronesian population of Taiwanese Aborigines comprises about 2.3% of the population and have inhabited the island for millennia. Migration to Taiwan from southern Asia began approximately 12,000 BC, but large-scale migration to Taiwan did not occur until the 18th to the beginning of the 20th century as a result of political and economic chaos in mainland China. The first large-scale migration occurred as a result of the Manchu invasion and conquest of China, overthrowing the Ming dynasty and establishing the Qing dynasty, which was established in 1644 and remained until 1911. In 1624, the Dutch East India Company established an outpost in modern-day Anping, Tainan in southern Taiwan after expelling the Spanish. The Dutch soon realized Taiwan's potential as a colony for trading deer hide, venison, rice, and sugar. However, Aborigines were not interested in developing the land, and transporting settlers from Europe would be too costly. Due to the resulting labor shortage, the Dutch hired Han farmers from across the Taiwan Strait who fled the Manchu invasion of Ming Dynasty China. Koxinga brought along many more Chinese settlers during the siege of Fort Zeelandia, in which he expelled the Dutch. Migration of male laborers from Fujian steadily increased into the 18th and 19th century. In time, this migration and the gradual removal of ethnic markers resulted in the widespread adoption of Han patterns of behavior, making Taiwanese Han the ethnic majority. It was not until the Japanese arrival in 1895 that Taiwanese first developed a collective Taiwanese identity in contrast to that of the colonizing Japanese. When the Chinese Civil War broke out between Kuomintang nationalists and the Chinese communists in 1945, there was another mass migration of people from mainland China to Taiwan fleeing the communists. These migrants are known as the mainland Chinese. Aborigines equals. Taiwanese Aborigines are the indigenous peoples of Taiwan. They speak languages that belongs to the Austronesian language family, and are culturally, genetically and linguistically closely related to the ethnic groups of maritime Southeast Asia and Oceania. Their ancestors are believed to have been living on the islands for approximately 8,000 years before major Han Chinese immigration began in the 17th century. Taiwan's Austronesian speakers were traditionally distributed over much of the island's rugged central mountain range and concentrated in villages along the alluvial plains. Today, the bulk of the contemporary Taiwanese Aborigine population reside in the mountains and the major cities. The total population of recognized Aborigines on Taiwan is approximately 533,600, or approximately 2.28% of Taiwan's population. The cities of Ilan, Hualien, and Taitung are known for their Aboriginal communities. In the 1990s, several groups of recognized indigenous tribes, which had traditionally viewed themselves as separate, united under the singular ethnonym Ya-1/2 or Aborigines. Hoklo the Hoklo people of Taiwan, Kinmen, and Penghu speak Hokkien and mostly originated from Fujian. The Hoklos account for about 70% of the total population today. During Qing rule, some Hoklo men took Aboriginal brides. Some of the Plains Aboriginals also adopted Chinese customs and language so as to be indistinguishable from the Han. Thus, many who categorize themselves as Hoklo have some degree of indigenous ancestry. It is possible to find families where the older members still identify themselves as Lowland Aborigine, while the rest of the family may identify as Hoklo. Among the Hoklo, the common idiom, has Tangshan father, no Tangshan mother refers how the Han people crossing the Taiwan Strait were mostly male, whereas their offspring would be through marriage with female Taiwanese Aborigines. Within the Taiwanese Han Hoklo community itself, differences in culture indicate the degree to which mixture with Aboriginals took place, with most Hoklo Han in northern Taiwan having almost no Aboriginal admixture, which is limited to Hoklo Han in southern Taiwan. Plains Aboriginals who were mixed and assimilated into the Hoklo Han population at different stages were differentiated by the historian Melissa J. Brown between short root and long root. The term Chinese Formsans has been used to imply Hoklo descendants, though this term has also been used to denote the Taiwanese people in contrast to the Japanese and mountain Aborigines. Hakka Taiwan's Hakka people descend largely from Hakka who migrated from southern and northern Guangdong to Taiwan around the end of the Ming Dynasty and the beginning of the Qing Dynasty. The Taiwanese Hakka communities, although arriving to Taiwan from eastern Guangdong and the mountains of Fujian, have also likely mixed through intermarriage with lowland Aborigines as well. Hakka family trees are known for identifying the male ancestors by their ethnic Hakka heritage while leaving out information on the identity of the female ancestors. Also, during the process of intermarriage and assimilation, many of the lowland Aborigines and their families adopted Hoklo and Hakka family names. Much of this happened in Taiwan prior to the Japanese colonization of Taiwan, so that by the time of the Japanese colonization, most of the population that the Japanese classified as Chinese Hoklo and Chinese Hakka were in truth already of mixed ancestry. Physical features of both Taiwanese Aborigine and Chinese can be found amongst the Taiwanese mainstream today. It is commonly disputed that Taiwanese are not Chinese despite common societal beliefs. This is still a controversial issue among the Taiwanese and Chinese and is continuing to put a wedge between the countries. DNA studies have shown mixed results of both Chinese ancestors and Taiwanese Aborigines. This finding would support both views, which does not clear the air any more than it had been already. For now, this dispute will still be at the top of deep discussions among Taiwanese and Chinese people. Mainlander the descendants of mainlanders settled first within the heart of large urban centers in Taiwan such as Taipei, Taichung, or Kaohsiung. High numbers of government officials and civil servants who followed the KMT to Taiwan and occupied the positions of the colonial government moved into the official dormitories and residences built by the Japanese for civil servants. The ghettoization of mainlander communities exacerbated the divisions imagined by non-mainlander groups, and stymied cultural integration and assimilation into mainstream Taiwanese culture. Nationalization campaigns undertaken by the KMT established an official culture, which reflected the KMT government's own preference for what it considered authentic Chinese culture. This excluded many of the local Taiwanese practices and local cultures, including the diverse cultures brought to Taiwan by the mainlanders from all parts of China. Unlike the Hoklo and Hakka of Taiwan, who felt excluded by the new government, the mainlanders and their families supported the nationalists and embraced the official culture as their own, with national culture being taught in school. The mainlanders used their embrace of nationalist culture to identify themselves as the authentic Chinese people of Taiwan. People identifying themselves as mainlanders can now be found in all parts of Taiwan, and through government agriculture and construction campaigns of the 1960s, mainlander communities or mixed marriage communities have been established in the high mountains and along the east coast. New residents or immigrants this group, known as Taiwan's Kinmen, consists of mainly new residents, originally from other nations, who have either migrated to Taiwan or intermarried with a local Taiwanese. The majority of new residents originated from Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines etc. Enmity between ethnic groups on Taiwan the deep-rooted hostility between Aboriginals and Hoklo, and the Aboriginal community's effective KMT networks, contribute to Aboriginal skepticism against the Democratic Progressive Party and the Aboriginals' tendency to vote for the KMT. When Taiwanese Han blood nationalists tried to claim Plains Aboriginal ancestry in order to promote Taiwan independence and tried to claim an identity different from that of mainland Chinese in spite of the fact that their own ancestry is overwhelmingly that of recent migrants from China and genetic tests show differences between them and Plains Aborigines, their claims were decidedly rejected by the actual descendants of Taiwanese Plains Aborigines, who seek to preserve their own traditional culture since the abuse of claiming their ancestry by Taiwanese blood nationalists to create a unique Taiwanese identity based on blood negates the actual significance of having Plains Aboriginal ancestors. Taiwanese Overseas. In November 2014 the Taipei Times cited an estimate of 1 million Taiwanese living within mainland China. Genetic studies, the Hoklo and Hakka linguistic groups, which statistically make up the majority of Taiwan's population, can trace some of their historical cultural roots to Hokkien and Hakka-speaking peoples from what is now China, predominantly the southern provinces of Fujian and Guangdong. The original migrations from China were as male laborers under contract to the Dutch, so there was considerable intermarriage with women from Plains Aboriginal groups. The human leukocyte antigen typing study and mitochondrial DNA analysis performed in recent years show that more than 88% of the Bentngren population have some degree of Aboriginal origin. A 2009 doctoral dissertation questions such findings and claims that the great number of Han immigrants after the 18th century is the main reason to consider that the early genetic contribution from Plains indigenes to Taiwanese Han has been largely diluted and no longer exists in any meaningful way. the lack of a totally complete and definite set of genetic record of Plains Aborigines, or conclusive understanding of their Proto-Austronesian roots, further complicates the use of genetic data. A Mahalanobis generalized distance survey of 29 male groups categorized Taiwanese as a separate subgroup of Northern Asian different from Mongolia, Korea, Shanghai, Nanjing and Hanzhou, associating Taiwanese closer to groups from Hainan, Japan, Ainu and Atayal. Notable Taiwanese people: Jay Chu, Ang Li, Yuan T. Li, Qian Ming Wang, Ed Hill, Vivian Xu, Yarni Tsin, Li Tenghui, Xu Qi, Hui Yin Chen, Amber Liu, Yang Lihui, T. D. Huang, Mark Duan. See also. Notes. References. External links: Taiwan, Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs, U.S. Department of State.